How to Move the Stars, A Bicycle Ride Twice Around the World by Jacob Lemansky. Chapter 2, Spain. February 24th, 2013, Spain. This morning we left our bikes at the hotel and walked to the medieval castle at the top of the hill. Looking out, I could see the city sprawling into the countryside, and 2 miles away, the Gallego River drained into the Atlantic Ocean. The location is perfect for a port and has been for a very long time. Sections of the castle wall date back 2,800 years. Now those walls protect a public garden full of flowers and trees. After a couple of hours of biking, Katie and I reached the edge of Portugal, and to get to Spain we crossed the Guadiana River on a ferry named the Virgen de los Milagros, Virgin of the Miracles. A local man on the ferry with his own bike insisted on giving us a tour, and when we arrived in Spain, he took us around the village of Ayamonte, first to the church, then to see a statue of a man I've never heard of. As we went around town, I noticed all the windows on the bottom floor of every building had bars over them to deter thieves. We rode into the countryside, and all the rural homes had bars as well. This wasn't the case in Portugal, and by contrast, Spain feels like a rough neighborhood. We left the city following an old railroad bed that was turned into a bike path. It took us through a coastal wetland fluttering with birds. In a nearby field, I saw 2 workers breaking a horse. One man held a rope lashed to the horse's head, while the other harassed it with a whip to keep it moving. The horse ran a circle around the men, pounding the earth into a ring of sand. Tonight, Katie and I have our hammocks hung on the beach in a quiet grove of thin trees. We are not as well hidden as I would like to be, but we ran out of daylight to find a better spot. Katie fell right asleep, but I was feeling a bit too exposed to let my guard down. I couldn't sleep anyways. 3 days ago I drank water from a spigot at a gas station. The attendant came out to tell me that it wasn't good for drinking, then pointed to a swampy area behind the building to show where it came from. The mistake has caught up with me. My stomach is in pain, and several times I had to walk to the sand dunes at the edge of the beach to be sick. Sleep never came as the hours ticked by in the quiet darkness. Soon the sun will rise, and I will have to bicycle. February 25th, 2013. Sick. Katie and I packed up our hammocks and left the park early, before anyone came by on their morning walk. I was awake anyways after being sick all night, and ready to get somewhere with indoor plumbing. Unfortunately, the next town with a hotel was an hour away. I felt weak as I pedaled. Katie went slow so that I could keep up. The morning was warm and bright, but I felt too bad to appreciate the scenery. We reached the village of Lepe and found a hotel. I slept for the rest of the day while Katie stayed productive and caught up on her work. February 26, 2013. Roundabouts. I woke this morning with my stomach feeling much better. Katie and I got back on the road following the coast as closely as we could, passing by towns, farmland, and beaches as we went. The big discovery of the day was a 120-foot tall statue depicting Christopher Columbus leaning on a cross. The stone figure towered over the confluence of 2 rivers. I've been seeing a lot of statues. Europe has more roundabouts than anywhere I've ever been in the United States, and in the middle of every one is a public space, some of which are better funded than others. Large and interesting statues sometimes fill the circle, or a nice collection of plants may be growing. Sometimes the name of the town is on display. Other times the centerpieces are laughably amateurish, such as a large rock that appeared to be painted by children, or a concrete statue that is possibly someone's very first attempt at sculpting. When evening arrived, Katie and I found ourselves biking through a beautiful forest of perfect hammock trees. They had sturdy trunks and high branches full of wispy pine needles, and each tree seemed to be growing 1 hammock length away from the other. We snuck away from the road in a moment when there were no cars, and pushed our bikes far enough away to feel hidden. I'm tucked in, warm in my sleeping bag, and listening to a light rain falling through the trees. Katie's in her own hammock, hanging right next to mine. February 27th, 2013, Sevilla. After a good night's rest, the cool air and dawn light pulled me from my sleep. Looking out of my hammock, I saw the pale white moon hanging low over the horizon in a soft pink sky. Katie and I left early for a long ride to Sevilla. The rolling hills exhausted my legs, but I felt happy as we went, and so did Katie. This is the first time she's ever bicycled more than 50 miles in a day, and she seemed to have an easier time of it than I did. We arrived in Sevilla late in the day and got herself a hotel room for the night. The city fits my stereotype of Europe. Cobblestone streets too narrow for cars, small shops tucked into the ground floor of old buildings, and small Catholic churches. A canal runs through the city as well, crossed by graceful bridges illuminated in the yellow light of the streetlights. I could see the long history of the place as well. Even the trees dotted about the town looked to be 500 years old. We found a nice restaurant along the water where we were taken to a corner table for two. Windows looked out at the canal, wine glasses were set on the white tablecloth, and a vase held a single fragrant lily. I took a picture of Katie, smiling and beautiful in front of the romantic setting. Then I picked up the menu and balked at the prices. We left and found a restaurant with a very different ambiance and mediocre food. Katie is elegant and fits right in a fancy table setting, but she's also thrifty and seemed fine with our decision to leave. I have that picture of her though, perfectly capturing the romantic dinner I was too cheap to buy. I started this trip with $60,000 in savings. It's enough to ride my bike for a very long time, but I'm not sure how long I will be going, or how much longer after that I will need to get another job. The only financial calculation I am making is to spend as little as I can, and hope my money holds out until the end. Each day I am buying my time. If I can get it for a good price, I can buy more of it. February 28, 2013, Shepherd. From Sevilla, Katie and I bicycled south through the rain, leaving the city and heading out into the Spanish countryside. I saw a man herding sheep across an open field of grass. I've never actually seen a shepherd walking with animals. That profession seems to have disappeared in the United States. I was taking a picture of the man when Katie got a flat tire. The first bike tour I ever went on, I left without knowing how to fix a flat. I was more prepared this time, but still not enough. The problem was that Katie and I have different sized wheels on our bikes, and I only brought spare tubes for mine. I have a patch kit too, but the rain was coming down pretty hard, and the patch required the glue to dry in the open air. I looked around at the surrounding fields and orchards, but there was no shelter in sight. On the side of the road, I removed the bags from her bike, then the wheel. I took the tube out of the tire and pumped it up. Normally I spin the inflated tube close to my face, running my lips along the outer edge to feel for any small puff of air and listening for the faintest hiss. Today I simply submerged the tube in a puddle and looked for the bubble. I found the hole and dried the rubber on my innermost shirt. Next, I leaned my body over to shield the rain as I applied glue, and waited like this for 10 minutes for it to slowly dry in the cold, damp air. Finally, I added the patch, and to my surprise, the tire stayed inflated for the rest of the day. The first flat tire of my journey, barely overcome. After bicycling through the rain for hours, we ended the day in the city of Los Palacios. We wanted to dry off and got a room for the night in a small, family-run hotel. March 1st, 2013, Flamenco. Early this morning, Katie and I woke up to an elderly woman hovering over us. I jumped out of bed as she wandered out of the room. The family running the hotel also lived there, and this was the grandmother, seemingly confused. Under blue skies, we bicycled through rolling orchards, vineyards, and cropland as we continued south to the city of Jerez de la Frontera. Heading this way is a bit of a detour from my quest to go east, but Katie wants to visit the birthplace of flamenco, a style of dance and music that I've never heard of. We made our way towards the city center and got a room in a downtown hotel. After dark, we walked to a small club to watch a dance performance. The room was lit in blue light and filled in with people by the time the performers took the stage. An older man sat playing guitar while three women alternated dancing or clapping along in the background. In frilly and flowing dresses, they used quick footwork to twist their hips and stomp along with the music. The dance was spirited and elegant and would have fit right in at a backyard party or a fancy ballroom. March 2nd, 2013. Angel of the Wind. I rescued a goat today that had its head caught in a wire fence. She reached out to eat the grass on the other side. Then, when the poor creature tried to back up, her horns got caught. She must have been there for a while. I could tell she was exhausted, and the rest of the herd had moved far away. I approached slowly as the goat jumped and pulled in a panicked attempt to free herself. Grabbing the horns, I managed to twist them to pass through the fence. She shook her head and ran away down the green hillside, back to the friends that had abandoned her. This morning we left Jerez de la Frontera and began to climb into the mountains of Sierra de Grazalema, a large green area on my map that I thought would be an easy place to find camping. But as the day wore on, we found ourselves trapped in a corridor between tall, barbed wire fences, keeping animals from the road and us from the trees. To make matters worse, the wind was becoming a problem. We fought to go forward as we climbed higher into the mountains. Blasts of air seemed to come from every direction, and we struggled to stay upright. Eventually we took to pushing, but even then, the strongest gusts would lay my bike over and pull me to the ground with it. Katie's lighter than I am, and was getting thrown around by the wind even more than I was. At the steepest section of road, I went back to help her push. She was frustrated, but there was also nothing we could do. The fences persisted, the sky darkened, and we were the only ones on the road. Our only option was to struggle forward. We pushed our bikes for over an hour before coming to a T in the road. From there, I led us downhill, hoping there would be less wind if we could get lower on the mountain. The sky was nearly dark, and we were getting desperate to find anywhere to sleep. Soon, a group of houses appeared off the side of the road. A single locked bar blocked the way for the cars, but Katie and I easily ducked underneath. Finally, we had escaped the barbed wire corridor. We took cover from the wind next to a shed and would have slept there for the night, but shortly after arriving, a car pulled into the neighborhood and the driver saw us in his headlights. A man in his 50s got out and came over to us. Katie speaks Spanish and explained to him that we were planning to sleep there for the night. He gave us a look, clearly not liking the idea. I thought he was angry, but he was actually concerned. He introduced himself as Francisco, then invited us into his home across the street. The house was built 113 years ago. Francisco said he was born in the bedroom. Being inside was comforting. The thick stone walls were unmoved by the roaring wind. Francisco explained that the area is known for its wind. A gauge on the roof recently recorded a gust over 100 miles per hour. He brought us into the living room to sit on old couches. Every wall was filled with mounted heads of deer and antelope. I mimed a rifle to ask if he shot them, and was surprised when he replied that he wasn't a hunter. Francisco began breaking up the wood to fill a large fireplace in the corner of the room. While starting the fire, he explained that he has worked in the park since he was 12, tending the land where he was born. I imagined that he never left this mountaintop. Katie translated for me, and later said that his rural accent was difficult to understand. She said he sounded like he had no teeth when he spoke, though he clearly did. After the fire was roaring and the house was warm, Francisco took us to the local pub called Puerto de Galiz. We climbed into the truck and held on tight as he raced down the dark mountain road. The ride felt dangerously fast, but I relaxed with the thought that he must have driven this way 1,000 times. We arrived at the bar, which also was a small restaurant and grocery store, and they too had walls full of mounted animal heads. At the counter stood 4 men with their backs to me, wearing plain farmer's clothing and drinking red wine. Cured meat hung from hooks above them. Jars of olives, loaves of bread, and a cappuccino machine lined the back wall. The scene was quintessentially Spanish. Francisco bought us a round of beer, then a plate of cheese and crackers for the table. When we were done eating, I noticed that he had left the cheese rinds, while I had eaten all of mine. I privately wondered if they weren't supposed to be eaten. All the bicycling makes me so hungry that I eat everything placed in front of me. I was tired by the time we got back to Francisco's house, but he wanted to cook for us, explaining that 10:30 at night was a normal time for people in Spain to eat dinner. He had something special planned and went to the kitchen to retrieve 3 small dead birds. They were game birds that couldn't be bought in a store. He said they were a gift from a friend who hunted them. After rejuvenating the fire, Francisco placed the birds next to the coals. The feathers burned away first, then the flesh turned into a blackened lump of meat small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. The neck was long and as thin as my little finger, with the charred head dangling on the end. Francisco said to eat the whole thing, no need to pick it apart. I took a bite and crunched down on the delicate bones. Popping the skull between my teeth was an especially strange sensation. The flavor was good, nothing out of the ordinary for a cooked bird, and chewing the bones was satisfying, like eating a crunchy snack. When the time came for us to go to sleep, Francisco was left with a moral quandary. He was leaving for the night to meet his wife in a village at the bottom of the mountain. They have an apartment there because she works a late shift at a restaurant. I saw the pain in his face as he mulled whether to let us be alone inside his home or to make us sleep outside in the wind. Katie assured him we would be fine sleeping outside. We laid our sleeping bags under the awning of his small covered porch. There's not much protection from the elements here, but I'm glad to have any shelter at all. The wind is still blowing violently, with short fits of rain. We are staying dry though, and I'm comfortable enough to sleep. Katie wrote a thank you note in Spanish to leave for Francisco. She called him our angel del viento, our angel of the wind. March 3rd, 2013, Spanish countryside. We left Francisco's house early in the morning, and on our way down from the mountain, Katie and I stopped at the bar where Francisco had taken us last night. Some of the same people were there, drinking coffee instead of wine. We bought bread and cheese and got started into another rainy day. Our route traversed steep rolling hills, past pastures of grazing horses, and wound through misty, moss-covered forests of cork trees. The landscape was beautiful, even in the gray weather. Late in the day, we approached a town called Ronda. Katie wanted to take a day off from bicycling tomorrow, and this town is known as a nice destination for tourists. As we climbed the last hill, a quiet forest appeared, and we decided to stop for the night. We have less than a mile to go, but we'll do it in the morning. Rain moved in as I hung our hammocks. I have them tied to different trees at our feet, but only one tree at our heads. I'm sleeping separately from Katie tonight, but tying up to the same tree helps me feel close to her. March 4th, 2013, Ronda. This morning, Katie and I left to finish the climb into Ronda. We got a room at a small hotel and laid out our things to dry. The day was still early, so I left Katie to catch up on her work while I went out for a walk. Ronda was first settled 2,600 years ago. The site was chosen for its excellent view and defendable position. The town is wedged into a corner between a cliff on one side and a gorge 390 feet deep on the other. Today, the chasm is spanned by 3 bridges. There's the Roman Bridge, dating back to Roman times, the Old Bridge, which is not as old as the Roman Bridge, and the New Bridge, which at 222 years old is not so new anymore. Despite being so old, the New Bridge was quite impressive. The platform was held up by 3 stone arches, the legs made of bricks reaching all the way down to the river. The construction took 42 years, but they did a good job. Now the bridge is used for cars. This evening, Katie joined me for a walk in the rain. I took her to the interesting places I found earlier, looked out over the cliff and admired the bridges, and walked to see the bullfighting stadium, eventually circling back around the hotel to dry off and eat dinner. March 5th, 2013. Lucky. We left Rhonda following a quiet, two-lane road between small farms, birch forests, and animal pastures. I checked my mirror, then moved across the road to better see a group of horses. Pulling into the lane, I heard a horn and squealing tires behind me. I never saw the car coming. From the perspective of the driver, I unexpectedly turned directly in front of them. They missed me by a split second. An accident requires two people not paying attention. Sometimes the drivers don't see me, and I save myself. This time, the driver is paying attention, and I had to be saved. The lapse in caution nearly ended my journey. I felt shaken and embarrassed. A sense of fragility settled over me. I felt grateful for a mistake that left me unscathed, a free lesson reminding me to be as safe as possible, to be vigilant at all times and what the stakes are if I'm not. I feel renewed deference towards the passing vehicles. The road ahead is very long, and even a single misstep may be one too many. In the afternoon, I followed the map onto what I thought was a road, but could only be described as a tractor path. The ground became muddy, grabbed at our wheels, and covered our bikes in muck. We considered going back to the pavement, but continuing forward was shorter by a few miles. At the end of the path, we had to cross a shallow stream and build up enough speed to splash through while Katie took off her shoes and pushed. Alongside the muddy track were the ruins of an estate. Several buildings still stood, overgrown, crumpled, and decaying. There are no modern construction materials, and a liberal use of stone arches made me wonder what century it was from. Later in the day, we passed a crumpled castle atop a mountain. One square tower remained, but most of the walls had fallen. The ruins across Europe are fossils of toppled societies. To see them dotting the landscape is a reminder of the land's long and turbulent history. Tonight, Katie and I are taking shelter at a large campground. We're the only guest here, so the guy running the place told us to set up wherever we wanted. Rain began to fall as we looked for a spot, but there were no trees for our hammocks. We walked to the back of the campground and laid our sleeping bags on the covered porch of one of the empty cabins. We have an uncomfortable and wet night ahead of us. I feel the hard wooden platform beneath my shoulder blades, and water is dripping through the boards above us. March 6, 2013. Tired legs. Katie and I spent the entire day bicycling through olive orchards. For 35 miles they stretched to the hilltops in every direction, broken up only by farmhouses and the occasional village. We started looking for a place to sleep an hour and a half before sundown, but the endless orchards left no patches of forest where we might hang a hammock. Rain was coming down in spurts, so I really wanted to be off the ground. With daylight running short, the only solution I could think of was to go as fast as we could and hope a spot to camp appeared before dark. My legs were exhausted, but I was compelled to sprint ahead. Katie did not have the same fighting spirit. She was also tired and dawdled forward. At her pace, we'd only be able to search a couple more miles before dark. There was no telling how far we might actually need to go. Frustrated, I encouraged her forward, but she was already doing her best. As night descended and a damp wind brought in dark clouds, Katie pointed to a patch of shrubs on an abandoned lot and said we should try there. Next to the foundation of a long-gone home, several decorative trees and bushes were growing close enough together to hang our hammocks. Just in time, too. The rain began to fall as soon as we were set up. March 7th, 2013, Montilla. Katie needed to catch up on work today, and I was happy to give my legs a rest. We biked only 10 miles to the town of Montilla and got a room in a small hotel. Katie stayed in while I took a walk to explore the city and find a grocery store. The grocery stores in Spain have been rather disappointing. Katie and I aren't cooking, so making meals with the raw ingredients available has been challenging. I expected there to be more packaged foods, pre-made foods, or even fresh vegetables, but there has been almost none. I've been eating a lot of bread with Nutella to get me through the day. As I walked around, I noticed that the town seemed to be pushing wine tourism. I'm not much of a wine drinker, I've never made a habit of using substances to alter or cope with my reality. The result is that I don't have any vices. Not alcohol, drugs, coffee, or sugar. This aspect of my character is one of the reasons why I'm fit for my journey of deprivation. I have wanted nothing, and so I am in need of nothing. In this way, I am unshackled, free to roam to the most desolate places, where any cravings I have can never be satisfied. Katie and I spent the evening in our room. We ate sandwiches on the bed and drank a cheap bottle of wine from the grocery store. As another storm arrived, we crawled under the blankets, feeling glad for a dry place to sleep. The rain pattered against the window, and I pulled Katie close to me. March 8, 2013, Olive Orchards. After sleeping in, Katie and I took a walk through the city to find pastries for breakfast. I got a few extra for later in the day, and with our bikes packed up, we got started. The rain from last night had passed, and the road was beginning to dry as we pedaled out of town. Around us, the landscape was rolling, and my legs felt good as I climbed. There were crumbling ruins on hilltops, villages sprung up every 10 miles. Between the towns were olive trees, and nothing else. Over the past 3 days, Katie and I have crossed 100 miles of unending olive orchards. The short, scraggly trees spread out to the horizon in every direction, all of them planted in perfectly straight lines, each one a precise distance from the next. Collectively, they created a uniform pattern that rolled over the hills like a silk sheet over a body. I wouldn't be surprised if someone had told me the polka dot landscape was a modern art masterpiece. The scene was so strange and very beautiful. The tragedy is, despite being surrounded by literally millions of trees, they're all slightly too far apart for a hammock. This evening, as I looked for a place to camp, I felt as if I were in some sort of ironic hell. After 2 hours of searching, the situation felt hopeless, and with darkness upon us, Katie and I pushed our bikes into an olive orchard, wrapped ourselves in the tarp, and laid on the ground to sleep. March 9th, 2013, Wet Night. Last night, soon after Katie and I laid down, a cold rain began to pour from the pitch-black sky, splashing us from above and seeping in from below. The tarp we were wrapped in quickly soaked through and became useless. Our sleeping bags grew cold as they took on water. Without other options, Katie joined me in the bivvy. The space was too small to fit side by side, so she had to lay directly on top of me. Pressed against each other like this kept us warm. I even managed to get a couple hours of sleep, but Katie was awake the whole time. The rain stopped at the very end of the long night, and with the first light of the day, we got up to leave. Everything was soaked, even the clothes I was wearing. They dried on my body as I pedaled through the morning, then we got wet again as we passed through more showers in the afternoon. In one small town, a woman told us that this had been the rainiest spring in 20 years. We passed another 50 miles of olive orchards with no end in sight. As evening approached, I wanted to try camping on the ground again. I told Katie that if we lay in the sleeping bags, her body heat would dry them by morning. She has been a trooper for me, stepping up to the challenge of everything I've asked her to do. But she drew a line at sleeping in a wet sleeping bag. She didn't even understand why I thought that was an option. We got a hotel in the town of La Carolina. Our gear is spread out all over the room, hanging from the curtain rods and dripping on the floor. March 10th, 2013, Wet Mountains. Katie and I left this morning, biking into cool, damp mountains. Misty clouds hung low, and we were in and out of rain throughout the day. A highway ran adjacent to the road we were on, tunneling through the land and spanning the valleys over magnificent bridges. We had to pedal around the hills, or climb up to the ridges. Where we passed through Despina Pero National Park, the mountains became extremely rocky. Fins of moss-covered stone, 50 feet tall, pierced through the hillsides. Gray cliffs, speckled by lichen, rose to the clouds. Katie and I pedaled into the late afternoon where we found ourselves surrounded by rolling farmland. The wet roads and climbing made for a tiring day of biking. Gray clouds threatened more rain. It was no good place to set up our hammocks. We pulled into the town of Valdepeñas to find a good place to stay. The city was pleasant. Homes and businesses densely lined the narrow streets. We bought bread and jam at a small grocery store, and Katie talked with the owner in Spanish to figure out where we could find a room. He pointed us down the road, and we pulled into a cheap hotel just as the rain began to fall again. Our room is small, but sufficient, with yellow and red plaid curtains and matching bedspread. Most importantly, we are staying dry. March 11th, 2013, Spanish Plains. Katie and I spent the day following a highway across an expanse of farm fields, all of them planted and soaking up the recent rains, which struck again today. I don't mind the rain. I layer on my waterproof clothing and stay mostly dry and warm. Katie started the trip without rain pants or shoe covers, and she has been less comfortable than me. Last week, we did find a sporting goods store selling rain pants. A size small would have fit, but they only had 2XL. She has also started putting plastic bags over her shoes when it rains. Along with the giant pants, she's pulling off quite a look. Failing to get her properly prepared for this trip was an oversight on my part. On my previous bike tours, I traveled during the dry summer months, and I've been living in a near-desert climate for years. I basically forgot that there are places that get rain every day. After 100 kilometers of biking, we pulled in to Villa Robledo, once again looking for a dry place to sleep and air out our gear. We got a hostel towards the edge of town and pulled in as a light rain was falling. Katie said she feels bad for asking me to sleep inside so much when she knows I'd rather be camping. I assured her it was no problem. I've got a lot of days of camping ahead of me. March 12, 2013, Valencia. Katie decided to take the train 135 miles ahead to Valencia. I wanted the bicycle there, so we agreed to meet at a specific hotel tomorrow, and I would camp one night along the way. Her train left at 7 a.m., and I got started too. I've been getting stronger. My bike no longer seems so heavy, and I now finish each day with a little more energy than I used to. Today, all of my exercising culminated in one of the peak performances of my life. I pedaled hard to feel the power in my legs. A light tailwind helped move me along, pushing on my back with a gentle touch. Without Katie, I was unrestrained and raced ahead at 15 miles per hour, nearly double our normal pace. Late in the morning, I unexpectedly found the Contreras Reservoir, where deep turquoise water pooled in a knot of mountains. I was following the highway when I arrived, which required me to cross 2 bridges and go through a tunnel to get to the other side. The tunnel was short, but the bridges were long, at least 100 feet high, and had a narrow shoulder and guardrails that didn't even rise to the height of my handlebars. The long drop to the water below was just an arm's length away, and the push of air from every passing vehicle nudged me towards the edge. I breathed a sigh of relief when I reached the far side. By the early afternoon, I had raced past 80 miles of olive orchards to reach the edge of Spain's inner plateau. From there, I had a gradual 55-mile descent to the coast. My legs were still feeling good, so I decided to get all the way to Valencia. I would typically have no reason to go so far in a day, except Katie was waiting for me, and that proved to be a powerful motivation. The last 10 miles took me across the city where I sprinted to keep up with traffic. By this point I was tired and struggling. After pedaling for 9 hours straight, my legs had no more pep in them. I found the hotel just before dark and walked inside to surprise Katie. Despite my exhaustion, we wanted to explore Valencia and went for a stroll following narrow cobblestone alleys busy with people. Old churches and castle walls mixed with a puzzle of buildings constructed over centuries. The bars and cafes were busy, and the smell of fresh breads waffled into the streets. After our long walk, I arrived back at the hotel on weary legs. Our room is on the top floor of a narrow row home with small windows looking out over the city. It's charming and romantic, and Katie and I stripped bare to take advantage of the soft mattress. A few minutes later, my hamstrings reached their limit, both of them cramped in a very inconvenient moment. I yelped in pain and rolled out from beneath Katie, moving to the floor to stretch and drink water. By the time I returned, she was sound asleep. March 13th, 2013, leaving Valencia. Katie and I slept as late as we could. My legs were exhausted from yesterday's effort, but I wanted to carry on. We left the hotel at checkout time and pedaled slowly across Valencia, looking for interesting sights along the way. Very quickly, we discovered a park that was 500 feet wide and stretched for miles across the city. The bike path took us past large, old shade trees, soccer fields, gardens, playgrounds, and fountains. Then, as we approached the coast and the Balearic Sea, we came upon a complex of modern architectural masterpieces. First was the Performing Arts Center, a massive, complex structure that looked like a futuristic, aerodynamic helmet. Next was the IMAX Theater, positioned in the middle of a square blue pond. The smooth bulbous shape made me think of a sand crab. The Science Museum was next, looking like a hulking skeleton of an enormous creature. Then came a fantastic bridge with both lanes of traffic suspended from a single curved pillar reaching high into the sky. Finally, there was a large blue building shaped like the back of a sailfish. I marveled at them as I pedaled by. When we reached the sea, Katie and I turned north, staying as close to the beach as we could. Next to the wide open water, the wind became fierce, blowing at our faces with such force that my tired legs could barely take me forward. We struggled for an hour, took a break, and struggled for a couple hours more, only managing to go 8 miles before stopping for the night. I thought that sleeping on the beach would be an option, but the wind-whipped sand stung our skin and got in our eyes. As night fell, we pulled onto the property of 3 empty condo buildings. Seemingly, they're only used in the summer. A storm blind has come loose in the wind and repeatedly slams against the top patio of the 11-story building. Katie and I are pressed up against a large outdoor grill made of cinder block. We lay our sleeping bags on the ash-covered bricks. Then I tried to shelter us by building a wall with a chair and a trash can. I still feel the wind swirling violently. The trees and grasses all around us are bowing and shuddering with every gust. March 14, 2013, Lookout Tower. The windy night brought spurts of rain. We got a little wet, then dried again by sunrise. Katie seemed to sleep pretty well, but there was so much movement from the gusting air that I struggled to relax. By morning, the breeze was all that was left, and we continued north along the coast under the beautiful sky. Once we got started, I noticed a clicking sound coming from my bottom bracket. Wondering what was wrong distracted me, and we stopped in the next little town so I could investigate the issue. Katie sensed my frustration and wandered to a nearby park to let me deal with the problem myself. I have a repair manual downloaded on my tablet, and after finding the right page, I figured out there was nothing I could do short of replacing the bearing. The situation isn't that bad yet, so I'm going to keep an eye on it and try to ignore the clicking sound. While Katie explored the park, she found a bike path following an old railroad bed that cut through the stone ridges and bridged the valleys. The road was climbing over steep hills, so getting on a nice flat bike path was a joy. The path took us to a bluff overlooking the sea where we passed a medieval stone lookout tower, crumbling at the top and graffitied at the bottom. I like finding old buildings and thinking about their long history. That tower was probably older than any standing structure in the whole United States. Shortly before sunset, Katie and I pulled into a forest of low, crooked trees growing in sandy soil near the beach. This place seems to be a public park, but we are between towns, so hardly anyone was here when we arrived. I wanted to be careful though, and we waited until the sky was dark before setting up camp. Katie's in her own hammock hanging right next to me, and I can hear the waves lapping against the nearby shore. March 15th, 2013, Pensacola. I've been trying to follow whichever road is closest to the sea. This makes for easy navigation, and I also avoid the larger hills just inland of the coast. In the early afternoon, this strategy led Katie and I onto a quiet dirt road through a nature preserve. I pedaled slowly over the bumps, past scrubby bushes and dry grasses. I looked around, distracted, and turned my head so far that I lost my balance. Before I could grab my brakes, I ran off the road and directly into the center of a wooden fence post. I was going so slowly that I simply came to a dead stop and put my foot down. I pushed my bike back to the road, and when I started again, I noticed my toes touching the front tire when I pedaled. Upon further inspection, I realized the front fork had been bent backwards about an inch. My bike was injured. I felt bummed and irritated for the rest of the day. The damage was not so bad that I couldn't ride, but I would need to get the fork fixed when I can. One magnificent view did lift my mood. As I came around a corner, I saw in the distance the castle of Pensacola, sitting at the high point of a small peninsula. A tightly packed village of beaming white homes spilled down from the ancient fortress, and encircling them all was a magnificent, tall stone wall. Beyond the land, Balearic Sea glistened in the sunshine. This evening, we pushed our bikes into a forest surrounded by low stone walls. A home might have been here long ago, but it has been replaced by a World War II relic. A domed bunker made of thick concrete, 10 feet in diameter with a narrow slit looking out towards the sea. 70 years ago, machine guns would have been positioned in there. Now, the walls and roof are crumbling with age. Hopefully the whole thing turns to dust before needing to be used again. March 16th, 2013, Spanish Coast. I made you breakfast in bed, I told Katie as I peeled the plastic cover off a single-serve yogurt and handed it to her. We lingered at our camping spot, enjoying a slow morning before rolling out under cool, overcast skies. Our route took us past farm fields and through small towns. We stayed close to the coast as tall, steep mountains loomed to the west of us. They were beautiful, with stripes of tan cliffs and green trees. I just didn't want to be bicycling over them. After a couple hours of biking, we discovered a farm for bonsai trees, where large greenhouses held hundreds of stunted plants. I've always liked looking at bonsai trees and contemplating their long, slow growth. I'm fascinated by the trees that have outlived their original caretaker to grow older than any human lifespan. To survive for so long, they require air, water, sunshine, and institutions. Late in the day, we passed a house that had a 14-foot tall statue of a T-Rex dinosaur covered in mosaic tiles. I recognized the light, joyful impression the artist was going for, but I wasn't in a good enough mood to appreciate it. Katie and I were getting tired. I missed a turn and led us onto a side road with a dirt surface and a lot of steep, short climbs. The choppy hills exhausted my thighs, and frustratingly, a fence kept us from getting onto a smooth, flat highway running right next to us. We were both hungry as well, but had no time to stop for a snack. The sun was about to set, and I was struggling to find a place for us to sleep. With the last of our daylight, Katie and I made our way down a hill to a beach where we were able to hang our hammocks. People were here when we arrived, but now the sky is dark and just one man is left, sitting in his car in the parking lot. We are pretty well hidden, but I'm nervous about someone being here at all. I'll stay awake until he's gone. Katie is less concerned. She's already asleep. March 17th, 2013, Barcelona. We camped near train tracks last night, and I was woken up by a train early this morning. The first light was on the horizon, so Katie and I got up to break camp before anyone arrived at the park for their morning walk. We continued down the road as the clouds broke up and the day brightened. 6 miles in, we arrived at a train station, and Katie decided to go ahead to Barcelona. The ride to get there was over 50 miles, and if we came up short, there would be no place to camp. She had some work to do anyways, and was happy to take a day off from biking. I was not inclined to take a rest, and the coastal road looked interesting to me. I gave her a kiss and said I would see her soon. The coastal road was interesting and challenging. There was quite a bit of traffic, and for stretches, the road became narrow and winding where the route followed the contours of the mountains as they dropped into the sea. I focused and stayed as far right as I could, but not too far. There was a guardrail, and just on the other side, a long tumble to the water. I arrived in Barcelona at sunset and made my way to the hotel where Katie was. We actually had an invitation to dinner. Frank and Janie, family friends who watched me grow up, happened to be visiting Barcelona for a night. We met them in a busy part of town not far from where we were staying. They knew all about my journey, of course. My parents were keeping them filled in. Frank said to order anything I wanted. All the exercise has ramped up my metabolism and I was hungry. I ordered 2 dinners, a chicken and rice dish, and pizza, and ice cream too. Besides Katie, Frank and Janie may be the last people I see who I know until I return home. I was also glad to see them in particular. All through my childhood, my family would visit a couple times a year. My dad and I would go hunting at their house in rural Pennsylvania, near where I was born. At their daughter's wedding, Frank told me I was like a son to him. I felt happy to see them, and happy for the meal. March 18th, 2013, bike repair. I was on a mission to repair my front fork today. The bike shop I found is the only one in Spain that sells the brand of my bicycle, a Surly. I was able to buy the exact same fork, except that the paint is black while my bike frame is blue. I was disappointed to break up my color scheme. I thought my bike looked like an old car with mismatched paint. To vent my frustration, I emailed a friend who used to work as a bike mechanic. Steve had a different take on the situation. He said that's a good thing. Two-tone means it's custom. He said just what I needed to hear. I'm now riding a custom bike. It's even better than before. The mechanic was kind enough to let me hang out while he worked on my bike. He said he doesn't generally let people watch him work, but he made an exception for me. He removed the fork and we held it alongside the replacement. I'd clearly bent the metal backwards about 1.5 inches. The mechanic didn't speak English, and he laughed as he lightly punched his flat palm with his fist, indicating I'd really smacked pretty hard. The repair took about 90 minutes. The mechanic did a good job, and I was careful not to annoy him with any backseat driving on the work he was doing. I felt a lot of relief to get my bike back in good working order, and I was particularly thankful that I could get the same fork. For what I'm trying to do, I need to have the most robust touring equipment available. I would not have been happy downgrading something as important as a front fork. Feeling appreciative, I thanked the mechanic, gave him a tip, and shook his hand goodbye. I rode back to the hotel to pick up Katie. She could tell I was feeling better with my bicycle repaired. We went for a walk through the neighborhood and stopped for gelato at a small coffee shop. We didn't explore too far, but the city is quite nice. March 19th, 2013, Gaudi. Katie and I slept in this morning. I needed the rest. My legs have been quite exhausted since a 135-mile day into Valencia. Physically, the most challenging aspect of bike touring is the persistence, more so than any individual effort. What's important is the ability to recover from bicycling while still sitting on a bike. I'm continuing to get stronger, but my legs never stop feeling tired. After breakfast, Katie and I headed out to wander the city. Barcelona has a famous architect named Antoni Gaudí. His eccentric buildings are inspired by nature, and they're easy to pick out across the city. His most famous work is the La Sagrada Familia Cathedral. Construction began in 1882, and Gaudí spent the last 40 years of his life overseeing the project. Even today, 87 years after his death, there's still a decade of work left to be done. I'm inspired by his commitment to a project that would require multiple lifetimes to finish. Gaudí knew there would be no reward for seeing the building completed, yet he dedicated himself to the task just the same. Commenting on the pace of construction, he said, "My client is not in a hurry." I appreciate an institution that can commit to such long timelines. In the United States, everything is built fast because corporations will never invest in multi-generational projects. Politicians don't have that much foresight either. Great works, with centuries-long creation times, are truly the domain of religion. Despite the work left to be done, the cathedral was already amazing. The buttresses looked like bones, and the spires reminded me of drip sandcastles. Inside, stone pillars rose up 200 feet, splitting at the top like tree branches. For those looking towards the heavens, the ceilings of cathedrals are always well adorned, and at La Sagrada Familia, the ceiling was magnificent. Intricate geometric shapes folded together and captured rainbows of light coming through the stained glass. The building will be an architectural masterpiece for as long as it stands. If that's 1,000 years, the Sagrada Familia will still be 100 years younger than the oldest church in Barcelona today. After visiting the church, Katie and I went to an outdoor park designed by Gaudí. The curved walking paths and sculptures created a sense of whimsy. Dr. Seuss books came to mind, and I wondered if his artistic style was inspired by Gaudí's work, or having grown up with the whimsical books, Gaudí's work now creates the same emotion in me. In any case, I really enjoyed the park. Katie and I ate peanut butter and banana sandwiches and looked out over the city. March 20th, 2013, Montserrat. Katie booked us a tour of Montserrat, a Benedict monk mountain retreat an hour's train ride from Barcelona. Positioned among white cliffs high on a mountain, the beautiful center was once a space of peace and contemplation for religious scholars. Now, tourists swarm the grounds, arriving via mountain tram or cable car. Katie and I took the cable car. We climbed 2,100 feet up the mountain, suspended in the air. The ride was only a few minutes, but the view was made for an exhilarating experience. As we ascended towards the picturesque monastery, built into the natural beauty of the stone mountains, I felt like we were really ascending to somewhere holy. Montserrat became a holy site in 880 when the image of the Virgin Mary was discovered in a cave. Perhaps an odd place to reveal herself, but look what has come of it. 1,133 years later, the church now has a real money-making operation. God works in mysterious ways. The site had a hotel, hiking trails, gift shop, cafeteria, and for entertainment, they had choir boys. 6 days a week, they sing Catholic hymns and chants for an audience of onlookers. The whole compound was quite large. The hotel was 5 stories tall, and one tower section attached to the monastery reached 10 stories high. The monastery itself had high arching ceilings, and throughout the space, they went heavy on gold paint. We listened to the choir boys perform. Their singing was pleasant, but given what's come out about the church, the fact that they are cultivating a group of little boys felt icky. They literally kicked them out of the choir when they hit puberty. The place was full for the performance, and the pious around me did not seem to be having those same thoughts. The boys were a hit actually, and people applauded when they finished. When we were done touring around, Katie and I took the cable car, then the train, back to Barcelona. We'll be bicycling again tomorrow, and I'm ready. My legs are itching to go. March 21st, 2013, leaving Barcelona. Katie and I packed our gear from the hotel, then headed out on fresh legs. I led us back to the Mediterranean coast, where again, to help me navigate, I stayed as close to the water as I could. We passed a wharf full of boats, beaches, a soccer stadium, and a museum of natural sciences. Then came the highlight of the day, a natural gas plant built in the 1970s, then shut down in 2011. The skyline was dominated by its 3 enormous chimneys, rising 650 feet above the sky. The styling and construction of the plant very much looked like it was from the 1970s, when enormous infrastructure was designed and built without computers. The whole site would fit well in a science fiction movie of the time, something that cast blocky robots. We pedaled 30 miles along the coast through many small towns and the neighborhoods that stretched between them. The challenges of biking along the shore is that a lot of people live there, which makes finding a place to sleep much more difficult. This evening, with rain threatening and darkness upon us, we were feeling desperate. There seemed to be houses everywhere. Even finding a room to rent is difficult in the dark, and that's only an option if there is a hotel. We biked for over an hour, searching for a place to sleep, but came up empty. Seeing the crowded coast ahead, our only option was to turn inland and climb into the hills until we were alone. Katie and I pedaled uphill away from the beaches and fancy residences, and pretty quickly we found a spot for our hammocks on a forested hillside. When there were no cars, we snuck off the road and set up camp without using headlamps. I'm a little nervous about this spot. There are a few houses nearby, but I don't think anyone saw us. March 22nd, 2013, Villa Vella. Katie and I continued through steep hills covered in green trees and shrubs. From the high points, we looked out at the blue sea sparkling in the sunlight. We passed through towns and where the land was flat, farm fields. Then, in the late afternoon, we came upon a castle called Villa Vella. Built on a small peninsula, steep cliffs offered protection from the sea, and a tall stone wall with battlements, towers, and arrow slits protected 24 buildings from any invaders on the land. In the age of sword fighting, a good wall must have been an insurmountable defense. Though, it was clear to see how trapped the people would have been if an invading army simply set up camp outside. In the afternoon, we reached an area where the mountains descended to the sea, and even though we stayed close to the shoreline, we were on a winding route that took us into the valleys and over the ridges. The hills were so steep that there was no way to get off the road without being on a mountainside. So once again, as the sun set, we were struggling to find a place to camp. With darkness upon us, we crossed a ridge with a small dirt path that allowed us to climb the mountain to a knob just above the road. We've got our sleeping bags on the ground, and the stars are shining over us. March 23rd, 2013, Castles. Last night, a few hours after dark, Katie and I were discovered. A pickup truck pulled up to where we were lying on the ground, its headlights shining right at us and our bikes. I woke immediately and sat straight up. My sleeping bag was fully zipped against the cold, and only my head poked out of the top. The dirt road we followed to get there looped right around to our camping spot at a picturesque point overlooking the sea. Maybe they were also looking for a place to camp. Perhaps a couple was trying to find somewhere romantic. I don't know, and they didn't get out to explain themselves. I squinted into the headlights as the truck backed up, then it turned and drove further up the ridge. Someone knew where we were, which meant they might come back. I looked over at Katie, still sleeping next to me. Her eyes were covered by her sleeping bag. She hadn't woken up. No one ever did come back, but I didn't sleep well for the rest of the night. We pedaled out of the mountains in the late morning and entered onto a coastal plain covered by sprouting cropland, and every 5 miles we passed through another small town. We stopped a couple times to buy groceries, but struggled to find anything good. Katie and I aren't cooking, so we look for anything that can be made without a stove, which seems to be very limited in the Spanish grocery stores. Mostly they have raw ingredients, Rarely do they have something like canned soup that we can eat without heating, and there's never any prepared food. Beyond the raw ingredients, the aisles do have a selection of long shelf-life goods. Today we settled on white bread, peanut butter, off-brand Nutella, and packaged cookies. I don't mind eating all the processed sugar. I just know there are better foods if only I could find them. Rain began to fall this evening as we searched for a place to sleep. When we came upon a campground, we pulled in to see what was available, but found that it was closed for the rainy season. Apparently we were the only ones on vacation this time of year. The gate was down, but we were able to push our bikes under to get onto the property. The campground did not have any spots for tents or hammocks. Instead, there were hundreds of small cabins. We picked one in the middle and laid our sleeping bags on the porch to avoid the dripping rain.